Those ain't Rolex diamonds. What you done to that?
What's that in reference to?
That is Imaginary Players off of Jay-Z's sophomore album, where he's talking about rappers 25 years ago, or 26 years ago, I should say, busting out their watches.
I think that's really the precipice that made him, at least in the watch market, one of, if not, I believe to be the most influential watch collector of all time. Let's get into it. So, controversial take here. If we're going to say that Jay-Z is one of, if not the most influential collectors of all time, we also have to put it, maybe compare him to somebody else, right, who I think is probably at the top of people's minds, which is John Mayer, right? And I would say John Mayer certainly is an extremely important collector, especially for getting people into the hobby. But I think where Jay-Z's influence is most seen is in collectors' choices. And that's what I really kind of want to get into. Obviously, I'm sure you have your own take in terms of John Mayer versus Jay-Z, who's the most influential.
Well, Jay-Z, I would say, moves the needle more with a bigger culture. Like he is at the peak of hip hop culture. And obviously, as we know, hip hop is the number one music in the world today, right? So he is always at the forefront. He's always the first to see. I don't know how he does or how he did it years ago. But anytime he touches something, he's the first to. Watches, clothes, cars, companies, and now he just blasted off into the stratosphere. But watches is one of those things where people really follow suit with him on a hip-hop culture level as well as a secondary culture level. It doesn't matter skin color, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, it doesn't matter. Across all borders, Jay-Z's the guy. Anytime he touches something and he says it's hot, that automatically means it's hot.
Yeah, and it all started really with essentially ice-style watches, right?
Yep.
Non-factory pieces. We're talking even going to Jacob & Co., right? Because 25 years ago, Jacob & Co. 5 time zone was like the watch to have, right? And so that's really, I would say, where the start of his influence really went to, right? So the iced out watches, having these big like 45 millimeter watches flooded with diamonds.
Absolutely, and then as you can see with Jay-Z's collection, it's very cool because you see the transitionary periods of almost the maturity of him as a person, as a business mogul, as a father, and you can see his collection absolutely mature because he started off with even though I never really saw a picture of him with any bust downs per se, he had his Rolexes, he had his Day-Date 36s, and then he went on to Jacob. But listen, Jacob was a guy that wasn't busting anything down. Jacob was a guy that had his own brand, right? And that became mainstream in hip hop. So from Jacob & Co., you saw him kind of, there was a period in time there, a couple years where, watches weren't really a thing in culture, right? It was kind of a little bit more off to the side, and then he brought in the Audemars Piguet. In my opinion, and Roman and I have had this argument before. Roman says it's Arnold Schwarzenegger. I say that it's Jay-Z, who was the person who really put AP on the map.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the next phase of his watch collecting journey, right? Especially starting out kind of in the early 2000s, maybe early to late 2000s was the concept line, especially because those were the in-watch, they were the Richard Mille of their day, right? And Audemars Piguet was very smart back then because there wasn't social media, right? Your social media was your brand ambassadors, the people who could generate eyes to the company. And back in the day, how do you do that? Well, you go with influential figures. Arnold was certainly one of them, but I don't think he has the needle-moving ability the way that Jay-Z did.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, kids from young to old want to idolize Jay-Z, and although people idolize Arnold in their own way, kids don't want to dress like Arnold, right? Yeah. Kids aren't up on Arnold's like new thing, what car he's driving, what clothes he's wearing. Jay-Z was that guy. I mean, and obviously hip hop is a culture of, I would say, competition. Yeah. Hip hop is a culture of people, wanting to one up each other. It's always been that thing. I have this better than you. I have this better than you. And that's just what kind of made the genre of music blow up. And Jay-Z was at the peak of that. Everything he touches, even to this day, in a slight way, he's like, I got this. I'm hotter than you. Come get me. We've seen it happen across the board with everything he's done.
Now, in terms of staying on Audemars Piguet real quick, because in the early, even to the late 2000s, right, AP was not what it is today. Obviously, he can pretty much get any watch he wants at retail. Skeleton, open work, perpetual. Oh, yeah. I mean, he has the new open work tourbillon. But back then, AP was not that big of a namesake brand, right? Patek Philippe, Rolex were. But what kind of impact do you think he had on the AP brand as opposed to other big name ambassadors like a Kevin Hart, for example?
Well, look, if we go back in time, Royal Oak Offshore, when at its inception, wasn't really all the craze, right? Mm-hmm. It really took genius marketing moves from AP to introduce guys like Jay-Z, guys like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and even athletes to promote and pump their product. Because in my memory, there wasn't really a brand that did it to that extent back then, or even has the same success rate doing it today. They don't really do as many collaborations today. But as soon as Jay-Z made his Jay-Z offshore, that was one of the early limited edition offshores, is what really made that bubble of offshores being popular. And then from there, it just segued into all different forms of metals. Royal Oaks weren't a thing, man.
They
were big watches. Now, obviously, things are kind of scaling down into a more minimalistic feel. You know, obviously, that's why ultra thins and 39s and stuff of that sort are bringing way bigger premiums than anything that's larger, because we're kind of going to that quiet stealth luxury that we've discussed in the past. But back then, in the early mid 2000s, even in the late 2000s, early 2010s, offshores were it.
And you would say that Jay-Z was the guy who really made that.
I think he was.
He was really who made that.
I think he was. And I'll tell you, you know, we can debate this topic back and forth, right? There really isn't a scoreboard where you can measure, any type of data where you can measure who the biggest influence was. But I would say for myself personally, when I was a teenager, you know, and I started in this business first and foremost, he was the guy that was wearing the offshores, right? We didn't have Instagram back then. We didn't have Facebook. Where anywhere you would see, whether it's in a magazine article or he's rapping about it in his music, you start to realize and recognize, hey, Jay-Z's wearing the offshore. This is what I want. Yeah. AP Offshore went right into another song that he made, right? Which is what really blew up, I believe, in my opinion, blew up another brand into the stratosphere. Believe it or not, and that was Rolex. The song with Kanye West, Otis, when he's talking about Hublots and the big face Rollie, I got 2 of those. Nobody at that time cared for or really wanted or understood what a big face Rollie was. He really made that pushed that to the forefront.
Yeah.
My Facebook profile for the longest time was what I like to call the Black Phantom. It was the 218-206 Platinum 41 with the black dial. Because I saw Jay-Z wearing it, so it was my screensaver or my wallpaper, as they say, for the longest time. And then my dad bought one. Then my dad bought a ice blue concentric Roman, and he wore that for years. And all thanks to Jay-Z. So just from my personal connection, I can say that I speak for the masses, right? I was wanting that watch. I couldn't afford a gold watch at the time. I was 18 years old, but all my friends wanted it. All the people I hung out wanted it. I used to hang out with an older crowd. The big face Rollie is what it was. Yellow, rose gold, that's what it was.
It's interesting because Jay-Z's Rolex collection has been so fluid, right? I mean, even in that album he referenced in another song was it Rollies that don't tick tock, Audemars that's losing time, hidden behind all these big rocks.
Yep.
Right? So it's like, even in that period, he was talking about big face Rolexes, right? And now he's he's going after the more rare stuff nowadays, right? And he just got a crazy Rolex that we'll talk about in a little bit. But I mean, he had, the Daytonas, he gave away even a 116505 chocolate dial.
He gave out a bunch of them, chocolate Daytonas.
Yeah. So he gave all those out at the party, but he's never really, I can't say, like, in terms of Rolex collectors, he's never been the Rolex collector. That's always been Mark Wahlberg for me, right? Mark Wahlberg was the Rolex collector. But when you hear, like, in terms of popular culture, no one else pushed Rolex the way he was. Like, it was the status symbol. You wear a big Rolex. It's in your face. Look at me, kind of, this is my watch. It's my Rolex. It's a date, like Jay-Z did, right?
Absolutely. And that was a time, again, this was, I would say, that album with Kanye West, I believe, was around 2011, if I'm not mistaken. 2011. So that was like 12 years ago, 2011. Yep. From there, where do we go from there, right? He got an ambassadorship with Hublot, and I think he kind of put Hublot on the map 100%. The best that he could have, you know, whether you like his Classic Fusion line of watches. As a matter of fact, and not because I'm biased towards Jay-Z, but I actually like those Classic Fusion ones that he made. Yep. We had a bunch of the black ones and a bunch of the gold ones because they did have a little bit of that minimalistic approach than a King Power did. A King Power was a massive 48 millimeter watch. But these Classic Fusions, I believe they were 42 millimeter. Like, they were sleek, they were clean, and they actually really represented his album at the time, which is Magna Carta Holy Grail. In fact, I think he even had that signature on the dial. Yep. So it was very cool. It worked with the times. So where do we go from here?
I mean, even sorry, not to cut you off, but even from the Hublot, I think Beyonce gifted him for one of his birthdays. I forget, it was a big milestone birthday. A $5 million Hublot.
Oh, that's right.
Most expensive iced out.
I think it was called the $5 million bang. Or something. It was exactly. Just all bag it out. Beautiful watch. So you ask yourself, where do you go from there, right? So you started talking in 1997 about rappers busting down their watches, and he already knew, he had the foresight to know that that's a no. You know, we're not saying anything is wrong with that, but from his point of view, his style, his influence, he thought that that was not the right thing to do. Jay-Z was always the guy, he was always the businessman, always the guy to walk into the corporate boardroom and be at the forefront, even from the environment he came from. We're at Richard Mille now, right? We went through the AP phase, and he's obviously still collecting APs, Rolexes, Hublots. Now we're at the RM phase, right? And this is where things really, really start to take off, because Jay-Z wore an RM27 before anybody really cared for Richard Mille. Not even close. Not even an RM27 Tourbillon. I remember he wore it at the U.S. Open. I was at that U.S. Open that he was at, where he wore an RM27. I didn't see him in his box. Around the time that he's starting to wear his RMs, what happens?
Brand blows up.
Forget about the brand blows up. There's a segue from him starting to wear RM. What happens in popular culture?
Tell me.
Social media.
Yeah.
When he started wearing the RM27 and his introduction into wearing RMs, this is where social media happened, right? And then from there, everything is history. As we know, with Instagram and social media, things live forever and they come fast. Really fast. Hey, what is that on his wrist, right? And obviously you see the transition from the basic Baby Nadals that he was wearing into RM27s, and then he just had the dopest lineup ever, which gets you to the sapphires.
Yep.
Jay-Z bought a sapphire. Jay-Z bought a Piece Unique sapphire. Jay-Z bought a green sapphire, blue sapphire. J Balvin hopped on the line. I believe Maluma hopped on the line. A couple other guys, because Jay-Z had it.
Even you saw Drake with Drake had a bunch of RMs. Travis Scott jumped on the bandwagon. He has a bunch of RMs.
He single-handedly, like he did for AP, put RM on the map for popular culture. Without a doubt, he is the number one guy, regardless of the fact that he never had his own RM, like Rafael Nadal did, Bubba Watson did, a bunch of different race car drivers, Romain Grosjean. Jay-Z was the guy. He, without having his own watch, he was the biggest ambassador for the brand.
And the way that you know that too is, most people, when you point to an RM collection, will point to Jay-Z first, right?
100%.
Just because he has the most badass, dope RM collection in the entire world, right? And if we're talking about even just RM like ambassadors, he has to be named as probably the most important non-ambassador there is.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
Because he was the market mover, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, we talk about the RM27, the 11s kind of came on the map. Jay-Z I've never seen really Jay-Z rock an RM11. He only wore like the rarest of the rare.
1102, I believe he did have.
He did have an 1102, but that was pretty much the only thing I've ever seen him wear. Otherwise, he had the RM35 Black Toro also, but he always wore the Nadals.
I saw him in concert with a Black Toro. Oh my God, that looks so good.
It's
looks
amazing.
So good. And then obviously, I think my favorite watch that he owns from the RM side of things is for sure the 2701 white NTPT. 1 of 10. That's probably my top 3 grill RM, because a lot of the times, as much as I love RM, some of their models are too big for me to wear all the time. And if one day I can actually afford a 2701 white NTPT, it's got that sleek, thin, minimalistic case, super light, and is very special.
And you know what's crazy is he's so ahead of the curve that he got all the RMs nowadays that you could possibly want. Right? RM27, forget it, it's in the stratosphere. RM2701 white NTPT in the stratosphere.
Sapphires.
The Sapphire's gone. Black Toro is gone. He got all of these before they kind of boomed, right? And now he's completely pivoted again, right? So he's pretty much, I haven't seen him much into the Richard Mille market anymore. Haven't seen him much into the AP market. Even in the modern market, right?
I don't know what he does on a daily basis. I'm not part of his part of his crew. But I will say, more and more you're starting to see him wear other things, and that brings us from RM into let's call it today. What's next?
Yeah,
right?
what at least I feel is next, and it's such an incredible culture shift in the way that he evolved his collection. Obviously, he went to Patek Philippe right next, which is kind of the natural evolution. It's the brand, right? It's the most prestigious brand in the world, arguably the most prestigious brand, of all time. Nothing's ever going to surpass Patek, in my opinion, right? And you see him wearing, things like 5330G New York, all the Aquanauts, especially. You saw him 5990 Rosie was one of the first to be wearing
Grandmaster Chime.
I
think he was the first one with a Grandmaster Chime, Sky Moon Tourbillons. I mean, he has had it all from every flavor, from a lot of times I like to follow Michael. Shout out Michael Rubin, his 4th of July party, because Jay-Z seems to attend that all the time, and I always like to see what watch he was wearing. And I remember the past couple years. This year he was wearing a vintage
5004 Ruby.
Yeah, he was wearing a vintage 5004 Ruby. Previous year he was wearing Tiffany 5990 Rose, and then you had the green Sapphire RM, right? So now you're making this transition to Pateks and some much harder to come stuff on the vintage side of things.
And then from Patek Philippe he evolved, which I would say is kind of the natural next phase of most people's collecting, which is kind of the vintage stage, right? It takes a lot for people to get into kind of a vintage watch, I would say, because essentially what you're going from is, modern collections, things that are made in current production, and then you're looking back in the past, what makes it special. And that's a really difficult thing to do, especially for somebody like Jay-Z, who has not that much time, I can say.
And I think this is even something that Mark Wahlberg highlighted before. I think I saw on some type of interview where the stuff that Jay-Z used to wear, whether it's AP, whether it's Rolex or Jacob or anything else, there needed no introduction into the actual product, right? He went to the direct source, he got whatever he wanted. Once you start jumping into the vintage game, you're now not buying the watch, you're buying the person you're buying it from.
Yeah.
Right? You have to entrust them to know that Paul Newman has all his original has all of its original parts. So this AP has this, or the AP. So that's once you start diving into the vintage side of things. But one thing I will say for Jay-Z is his ability to always have surrounded himself with the best people. Yeah. So anybody he's buying watches from are, creme de la creme.
No question. It all really started, I would say, with the watch that undoubtedly broke the internet, the 2499.
Yeah, man.
Right. Piece unique 2499 with that chain link style bracelet. And then he followed it up with two 5004s, the black one in platinum on bracelet, and then the ruby one, which we saw him wear at Michael Rubin's party. He also wore it, I think, to the Louis Vuitton Pharrell event, if I'm not mistaken. When you talk about important Patek Philippe wristwatches, right?
Real Patek Philippe, as we like to say, from the purist standpoint.
Apart from a stainless steel 1518, it doesn't get more special than these three.
That's right.
Right? Because to put into context, a 2499 has a 30-year production run, and they made the same amount of 1518s they did as 2499. Not to mention 2499 is 38 millimeters, so the biggest outside of essentially the 5970 that came,
because 3970 scaled back.
Yep, because 3970 scaled back, right? So we're talking about something that was so atypical. 38 millimeters back in, we're talking the 50s and 60s. Nobody was doing those kind of size watches with that style of bracelet. And then you go to the 5004, which is the first of the split seconds Lamania-based movement. I mean, it just doesn't get more special than this from Patek Philippe.
And this is one of the reasons why I feel he's such an important icon, especially in the world of watch collecting, because he introduced me to a line of thinking. And I've been, when you're in the business and you see so many things cross your desk and you're doing so many trades and you see so many trends change, I never thought that I would think of Patek Philippe for myself personally in a bracelet form. In other words, I'm not buying a piece unique 5004 Ruby, but for example, today we're offered a 5130 on a bracelet.
God, that's beautiful. Yeah.
I never thought that I would actually like that watch.
It's amazing.
But now that Jay-Z is kind of wearing that, right? You have your traditional, elegant, complicated Patek Philippe, not your Nautilus or Aquanauts, on that type of bracelet. And that to me is now hot.
Yeah, I mean, I just sold, for example, recently a 51461
on the bracelet, right?
On bracelet. That was another one. That's another amazing watch. 5960 on bracelet.
Yep.
Those are all starting to become more popular. It feels like because of this, right? And this is really the next phase. But he's also, I mean, listen, the Patek, he can be overlooked. But I mean, even beyond this, he's picked up some incredible pieces. One of them being, he just picked up a Royal Oak perpetual calendar, Yves Klein dial. That's another incredible piece. Not to mention, he picked up a yellow gold mother of pearl. Another perpetual Royal Oak, and then
he did have the old 39 skeleton perpetuals prior to
2589
prior to even, I would say, the hype of the market and the boom pre-2020. He did have those before, so his sights were kind of set on that already. Maybe he just bought them because maybe he had them from the past, but whatever the case may be, you're starting to see him go from modern into more of the 39 perpetuals and rare stuff, rare dials. And I'm very excited. What's going to be difficult for him now, I don't even think he consciously anymore at this point in his career tries to be the guy at the forefront of the hip hop industry, although just he is by osmosis, right? It is what it is. To sell this type of product to to mainstream culture is going to be there's going to be big roadblocks. In other words, I'm not really sure that rappers or athletes or people are going to gravitate as much towards this stuff, because
it's going to be difficult for a modern collector to really understand the direction he's going, right? Because even, for example, he made some newer acquisitions, something like a 5070 in salmon, right, which is super limited, 5070.
Only we know how rare that is.
It's a watch guy's watch, right?
Yeah.
Even, for example, shout out to Mental Watches, he just bought a Tiffany stamped Paul Newman, Jay-Z did, right, from Adam. So, I mean, those are watches that you need to understand to appreciate, right? Because a $2 million Tiffany stamp Paul Newman to the average person is like, what? Like $2 million? But of course, like as rare as it gets. It doesn't get much rarer than this.
Absolutely. I think he's gotten to the point, obviously, with his maturity, with his age. I mean, he is over 50 years old, I think, at this point, if I'm not mistaken, where I think his next, he's a very art-driven guy, so I think his taste and his maturity has got him to the point where he's trying to kind of go after the pride of ownership type of thing.
Yep.
And I could see him moving forward, maybe, tackling the auction houses and buying up 1518s or 2490. I mean, there's so many references out there that are super and uber rare. So I'm very excited to see where his collection goes. Now, for me, obviously, we discussed earlier guys like John Mayer, and there's also guys even like Pharrell or even Swiss Beats in hip hop who have a very, very unique and broad taste. Obviously Swiss Beats now with the Bethune, he's got a very quirky, as I like to call it, taste.
That's fair.
I'll be excited to see where it goes from here. I think he's going to be a collector forever. It seems like at this point it's all about passion. I don't think he's trying to flex a 5070 on anybody, especially not his colleagues, right? I don't think he's, for the 20-year-old rapper who looks up to him, I don't really think he really cares to say, hey, I have a
he's invested as a watch guy, right? Like he's clearly invested in the hobby. He's invested more so now he's more driven by passion than trying to
flex.
Exactly. Listen, to go back to the original topic, right? We essentially said that we believe Jay-Z is the most influential collector of all time, right? There's other people who are influential. Mark Wahlberg, right? Because
his collection.
He has the watches that generate eyes, right? That's the thing. Like he'll be big on social media because he'll come out with a crazy Patek or crazy Rolex, and that generates buzz.
And clearly shown. I mean, one of my favorite, I would say, things that Patek Philippe did recently in terms of a marketing standpoint is when they rolled out the 5711 Tiffany's. Who got them first?
Yeah, all the big guys.
Jay,
Leo,
Mark, Leo, Tommy Hilfiger got one down the line. I think Ellen got one.
What's his name?
LeBron got one.
Yeah.
So they rolled them out to those celebrities first, and as soon as you saw that 5711 Tiffany on Jay and Mark, you're like, yep.
It was a game changer.
That's the watch.
Yep. And then even, for example, John Mayer, right? Like who just had a lot of buzz. He got the Jigsaw Rolex, for example. He's probably the guy that I would say is the collector who's gotten more people into watches than anybody else. But he's not a market mover, not in the same way that we have.
I agree.
I believe that we've shown Jay-Z to be a market mover.
I would say that Mark Wahlberg is probably a more discerned collector because he can give you the whole story of an IWC Big Pilot and why he likes that, and he'll wear a watch. John Mayer, and he'll wear a watch that's $200 just because of the passion and because of certain things about it. But his collection is very diverse because he's got everything from AP to Rolex to Patek to IWC to Omega, and I mean, the list goes on and on and on, right? But I'm talking about from a big culture standpoint, nobody moved the market like Jay-Z. Nobody made Rolex hot like Jay-Z. Although John Mayer's Daytona, we did kind of name it after him. Rolex, AP, Patek, Richard Mille, Jay-Z is the guy.
Guys, thank you so much for watching. Adrian, thank you so much for joining me. I think this is a real treat.
We could sit here all day and talk about this. This is great.
No, these are the topics that really excite me, especially because, I mean, Jay-Z's collection has to be, I think, one of the most important in the entire watch industry. So, guys.
Comment down below. Actually, I would love to hear what you guys think about or who your favorite collections are. And some of the best collectors out there are not even celebrities and just on the low. They're actually not even on Instagram. They don't want to be seen or known. But guys, comment down below your top 5 people or top 5 collections that you think are the best, whether it's a celebrity, whether it's an athlete, a world leader, whoever you deem necessary, comment down below.
Guys, thank you so much for watching. Adrian, thanks again for joining. We'll see you guys in the next one.